Welcome to our podcast series called Lime Time in Texas. My name is Dale Rand. I'm the Executive Director of the Lime Association of Texas. And today we have a real expert with us. We have Kevin Ingram, who's one of our members of the Lime Association of Texas. And so today we're going to ask Kevin some questions. And I'm just going to start off by having Kevin introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background in the use of lime.
So I started my educational journey studying chemical engineering. I went on to get a PhD in analytical chemistry at North Texas. While there, I was part of an industrial group. We did everything from fly ash and cements to actually having a lime binder for refuse-derived fuel. Taught for a year and a half in Arkansas and then came to work in the lime industry almost 32 years ago. I just do a little bit of everything in the lime business.
Okay, thanks Kevin. So I sometimes pose as a lime expert, but I'm really not a lime expert when you compare what Kevin knows. With his background in chemistry, he knows a lot about the use of lime. So I'm going to ask him some very specific questions. But Kevin, we all know that lime is referred to as the versatile chemical because it's used in so many applications. So I wanted you to could you just give us a feel for maybe the top 5 to 10 biggest uses of lime that you're aware of?
Well, sure, Dale. The biggest one's going to be steel. 30% or more of the lime in the world goes into steel making. Then we go into environmental applications, whether we're talking about water treatment or air treatment. That's really important because we want to be able to breathe and drink water. The next one is going to be roads, construction that way, whether we're talking about roads or asphalt, or we're talking about aggregate modification. Then we're going to get into non-ferrous applications, gold and copper. You need lime for that. Most people are going to be familiar with building, like for mortars and stuccos, but that's a small amount of it. So we aren't just making a cement that sticks rocks together, we're purifying materials and improving structure.
Okay, great. Well, I wanted to, just out of curiosity, can you tell us a little bit about some of the more, I'm going to call it obscure uses of lime that most people would not know about?
Well, let's go to the home. Number one is going to be tortillas. You have to have lime to break down the corn into masa so you can roll it out. In doing so, you're actually also releasing niacin, one of the B vitamins, so it also improves the nutrition. Not only do you make the tortilla, but you do that. Next, let's go with sugar. You need sugar or lime to make sugar. So whether you have sugar cane or sugar beets, you chop them up, you steep them in hot water, you throw in lime that dissolves all the sugar as calcium sucrate. You can filter off all the impurities, all the chunks that were still there. And then on the other side, you add CO2 back in order to precipitate out calcium carbonate and have a pure sucrose stream. So actually, there's a lot of lime plants in the US and the Dakotas that are standalone just going into sugar factories, sugar beets. So that's nothing. Let's go with orange juice. Is it in your orange juice? No, they typically will use calcium carbonate or limestone to add calcium. So you see that calcium added is going to be limestone. However, once they squeeze the juice out of it, you got a pulp that still has 5-6% protein, a lot of fiber, but it's got a lot of acid in there. Well, what do you do with that? You add lime, you pug mill it in, you extrude it as little cubes, and that becomes animal feed, a high quality animal feed. And then we can't forget in the Pacific Northwest where they have magic apple trees. What? Well, you can get apples from Washington State all year round. Is there a tree that grows all the time? Yes, there is. What happens is called controlled atmosphere storage. They'll put apples in big containers. They have a lot of these warehouses. At the end, once they're done, they'll cool them down. They pull oxygen out, and they use hydrated lime in there in bags in order to remove CO2. And what that does is allows them to have many months of storage of apples. So they need more apples, they open up one warehouse, they pull them out once they get rid of all, or add oxygen back and pull the extra CO2 out. But the lime's reacting with CO2 there.
So is there a difference in food grade lime and regular, what we just think calcium oxide lime?
For that, it's going to be any of the limes can go in that. Tortillas will typically be a food grade lime, which is more of a niche product. Most of the limes in the US would meet the chemistry, but sometimes they'll have silica or chunks like that in there. And no one wants to bite down a tortilla and have a chunk in there.
Okay. So I don't need to go out and try to make masa just take a bucket of the hydrated lime I have and make it.
Well, I wouldn't suggest doing that. It wouldn't hurt you a little bit. And I would be worried about any of the hydrated lime sold in the local grocery stores that people take home to make their tortillas out. I'm not really sure where that comes from.
Okay, all right. Well, speaking of where lime comes from, we know I've heard different stories about how old lime is, and I've done some research. So, to your knowledge, when was lime discovered? How far does it go back? We know it's mentioned in the Bible, but is it,
Well, one rule or one thing to look at is all the old languages have words for lime. That means it was not discovered in one place and spread out. It would mean that it was easy to develop or find in multiple locations. So what could it be? Well, let's go to limestone. How do you make lime out of it? You heat it up. Well, back a long time ago, where might you be if you didn't have houses? Well, caves are a good place to go hide. You have a fire. You put it out in front, because if you put it inside, you're going to smoke yourself out. Well, most caves are in limestone formations. So you put your wood out front, you light it, it starts to cook. Old hardwoods can get hot enough that you can calcine it just a little bit. Now, all of a sudden you have hard rocks that are exposed to fire, and then rain comes down, it falls apart. Wow, that's magic. And then, after it sits for a while, it hardens back up, the lime reacts with the water to form calcium hydroxide, reacts with CO2 to form calcium carbonate, and you have calcium carbonate cement. So no telling when it first was found, but it's something simple, and it was reproducible around the world. But then once all of a sudden you have rocks sticking together, that's sort of magic. You take lime, there's a certain type of rock, you take fire, you add water, and you put rocks together.
All right, so I don't know if we're going to credit the caveman, but it sounds like maybe the caveman was the first one, possibly the first one. I always say the lime's probably at least 3,000 years, but I've read 3 to 10,000 or more. Who knows? But we weren't there, so Kevin and I are not young guys, but we weren't around back then. But so, and I kind of already asked this about the oldest use of lime, but the oldest documented use of lime. What is?
Well, I'd say there's two things. Obviously, building would have happened because they could see in the fire pit you're building. So there's going to be lime used as mortars to build. Don't know when that started. But two areas are documented are in Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, used to sort of a whitewash inside buildings in order to make it whiter. I mean, rocks are dark. You don't have a lot of light. You didn't have electric light. So to make it brighter in there, you could do a lime wash on it. All of a sudden it's white, it reflects light better. About the same time, the Assyrians were using lime. If you set up your fire pit, you have limestone, and you have sand around, you start noticing little silica rocks forming, glass. And so they actually started making glass, not for windows, but in order to have jewelry and decorative items. They realized mixing limestone, sand, and heat, and maybe throwing some other mineral in there for color, you can make a little glass, and so you had artificial gemstones.
Interesting. I didn't know some of that. Thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. So I know, and I don't know if you mentioned this earlier about the common uses of lime, but glass production even now is still one of the big uses of lime. Is that correct? Is it limestone or is it actual lime?
Most glass production is limestone. They can use burned material at times. The biggest problem is it doesn't react well with the refractories. And so they will tend to stay away from pre-burnt lime, although fiberglass will use burnt dough lime.
Okay, I'm going to try to ask you a hard question now because I've researched this a little bit, but what role did lime play in Roman concrete? A lot of people are familiar with the term Roman concrete, and so exactly how does that chemistry work that lime is?
To be fair, the Romans survived, so the Greeks figured this out before them. You know how it is, the survivors rewrite the story. But if you take lime and you take pozzolan, something from the town of Pozzoluna, I don't speak Italian, but it's tufts from Mount Etna. You may have heard it blows its top occasionally. And so you take that, it's a lightweight rock, you grind it up, you mix it with lime and water, it would set up. So our modern word pozzolan, which we talk about in soils, comes from that. So without lime, Well, what is pozzolan? Let's just go back to that. It's a mineral that in the presence of lime and water forms a cementitious compound. So it's going to be silica aluminates. Sand is silica. You really like to have clay from soils, or you like to have volcanic ash, which has both alumina silica. That's fine, but it can't activate itself. It can't form the cementitious bonds. So the Romans, the Greeks, figured out that they can mix this stuff. And the great thing about it, they tended to have what's called a hydraulic lime. It's a natural pozzolanic lime. There's a little bit of clay still in there. And so it would start to set up. So it would set up underwater. So Rome didn't have good harbors. How do you make a good harbor? Well, you build wooden structure, you throw rocks in there, you throw a mixture of the pozzolan, lime, and water in there, and it sets up. And all of a sudden you can have places that you can hook up out in the harbor or make a harbor.
Oh, okay. I'm learning a lot already, so I should have paid attention when the first time I went to your class. So this was an easy question. Roughly how many lime producers are there in the United States? I know it's not produced everywhere, so
that's tough because do we include the sugar makers? They typically are not, but there's more than a dozen of those that have their own kilns. Okay. And those are co-ops up in the Dakotas, Montana and all. They're harvesting sugar beets or running their kilns for 6 to 12 months. But most of it's going to be from the top 6 or 7 producers. There's a few smaller ones still out there. But you're looking at 5 or 6 that are multi-location producers.
Okay.
Across
the U.S.
Right.
The last question I have for you for now is that, and I've said this before and I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly, is lime used in the production of all steel, or is it just certain types of steel, and what exactly does it do in steel? So.
Well, it's steel being used. Sorry, I couldn't avoid the pun there. But yes, as far as I know, it's used in making all the steel. Why? Well, you're melting, let's do scrap for an electric arc. You're melting scrap. You're taking it to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's exposed to the air, it's going to rust really rapidly. You don't want it. So you need a layer on top to protect gases from getting in there. Not just oxygen, but also nitrogen and water, because water will break down and form hydrogen and oxygen. And all those are bad for it. So you need an extra layer. Well, what lime will do is go in and react with the silica alumina. So whether you got dirt from the ground, or if you're doing integrated mill and you got dirt from where your raw iron ore is coming from, it reacts and it forms what's called the slag. Now, you can make slags out of a lot of things, but you want something that's compatible with your refractories. When they're melting this steel, it's not in a steel vessel, it's in a steel vessel lined with refractories. That refractory is going to tend to be, let's say, like a dolomitic refractory, which is a type of lime, or like a magnesium carbon brick. You want something that's compatible that doesn't eat it up at high temperature. So you throw lime in, it reacts with the silica, you make your slag. That's preventing air from getting in. It's also keeping moisture out, which is important. The next thing it does, though, it gives you a second layer. So you melt stuff, whatever impurities are in your raw material has to go somewhere. If you throw in tool steel, if you throw in cars, you throw in other things, manganese, moly, chromium, there's a lot of impurities in there. I'm trying to make some new steel. I want to get rid of as many impurities as possible. So that calcium reacts with silica, is compatible with your refractories, it keeps moisture or air out, it keeps heat in, and it also gives you a second place for your impurities to report. So anything that can oxidize, so once again, chromium, moly, molybdenum, all oxidize and they all want to be in the slag. And so it allows you a place to get rid of your impurities. So as far as I know, all steel uses lime.
Okay, great. Well, that's kind of concludes this part of the podcast today. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about general uses of lime. As always, if you have questions actually for me or for Kevin, feel free to submit them on our website to limetexas.org, and we'll be glad to try to answer those questions for you. I can answer questions on soils and hot mix, but Kevin, as you can see, can answer questions on just about any use of lime. So feel free to submit those questions to us if you have them. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for watching this episode of our podcast. If you want to learn more about the use of lime, reach out to us on our website at limetexas.org. You can also email me at dalerand@limetexas.org. And please follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.